Good morning, ladies and gents, and welcome to number 2 of the ISBL Talking Head series that we're doing a live stream today. And today we're going to be talking about SchoolMark. And for those of you that don't know SchoolMark is a quality assurance scheme that's been developed in consultation with the Department for Education and awarded to the Institute of School Business Leadership. It's a program that provides schools and trusts with a 360-degree assessment of their strategy and management of resource. It helps recognize best practices and delivers a roadmap for those looking to improve. In this session today, I'll be joined by none other than Chief Exec Stephen Morales, but also I'm really happy to be joined by our guests, EMAT, Josh Coleman and Paul Wheeler, who are going to talk about first-hand experiences of SchoolMark and the process they went through and the impact that it's had on their trust and its schools. So for all of you that are joining us live today, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day. Don't forget, you can go to the Q&A section. You can ask a question on there, and I'll present it to our guests at the back end of the show. If you do see a question that you like the sound of, you can upvote that. So the ones that with the most vote will focus on today. But if we run out of time, we'll try and get that information to everyone who's joined. So our guest, Josh Coleman, EMAT Chief Executive and Counting Officer, with a lifelong commitment to facilitating best outcomes for children. Josh has worked across the education sector at a senior level for over 20 years, starting his career in further education sector before moving and working for those that education is a challenge. He moved into multi-academy trust sector with the belief that he could bring his broad experiences to benefit children earlier in their learning journey and help ensure that they have a better life chance. Although a common aspiration underpins many of the people involved in this sector, this important focus can sometimes be far from the forefront of the discussion surrounding the multi-academy trust model. Married with a father of 2, he is also the chair of trustees at a small community-based charity that provides communication aids for those who need them and a platform for their voice to be heard. Also today is EMAT Chief Operating Officer, Paul Wheeler. Paul joined the trust in January 2018. His background is in finance, having previously worked at director level for an international mass manufacturing, engineering and construction firms. He's also been finance director for a number of SMEs companies across the UK. Paul has a successful track record at business transformation in the private sector, higher education and central government. And Paul joined EMAT from the Multi-Academy Trust in Birmingham, where as CFO and then CEO, he saw the transition period of the trust and the rebrokerage of their schools. Paul is responsible for the oversight of the head office teams which support their academies with finance, human resources, IT, estates management. And Paul is also a school resource management advisor. And just to prove that the gents are both here with us today, because I'll have to move them to the side stage. Here they are in their lovely EMAT offices. Good afternoon, or good morning, gents. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Thank you, fine.
Brilliant. And we'll come back to you shortly. So thank you very much for taking some time out of your day. And we are going to I really want to hear a lot of what you've got to say today. So, but Stephen, if I can just start with you, how has January been? I know there's been our first Talking Heads Crowdcast with Karen Bonter, big success. There's been 2 regional conferences. What's the rest of January shaped up like?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, and welcome to Josh and Paul. Welcome, colleagues on the call. Busy, like everybody else. We're trying to make sense of the reform agenda. What next for our education system? The white paper and the ambitions that were set out so boldly in 2022, and we know a lot of that is being pared back. We're doing some interesting work on capability, which is very dear to our hearts. So the extent to which we can support not only school business leaders, but head teachers and governors and trustees as they navigate their way through the complexities of our system and the challenging accountability environment. And in many respects, SchoolMark talks to all of that. So busy on those fronts, and some really good conversations with ministers and senior officials. And in fact, we had David Withy, Chief Executive of the SFA, talk to our advisory board last week, and we had the Regional School Commissioner talk at our regional London event. So really energetic and positive start to the year for us. What I just want to say very quickly, Ryan, is a couple of things. First of all, it is right that people call out the extent to which there are essentially 4 middle-aged men on the call today, and we need, as you know, as a sector, we need to change that. The shape of the conversation and those participating needs to change, and please believe that we are doing everything we can to make that happen. This is a series of crowdcast events, and the first one, as you said, Ryan, we enjoyed the company of Karen Bonser, who is a passionate, long-standing advocate of the profession, and does that with a backdrop of some incredibly personally challenging circumstances. But we've got a series of these crowdcasts that are running. We're going to bring different faces to the fore. And I just want to take this opportunity to say how important EDI is to the Institute. I chair the sector leaders focus group. I instigated the first sector roundtable on EDI, and we're planning to do something similar this year. We were instrumental in developing the paper on transgender with King's Council, and we recently reissued our statement of intent along with other sector bodies. But it's absolutely right that we, that the colleagues at the sector call us out if that there aren't visibly a range of personalities and faces on these kind of forums. But trust me, that is something that we have planned. Josh and Paul are both individuals super committed to equality and diversity, and the work they do in their communities, the children that they support, and even the way that their teams are structured is testimony to that. But look, busy, positive, lots of things to get stuck into. So I'll leave it there for now, if that's okay, Ryan.
Yeah, okay, that's great. And I know there's tons of content. I know the trustees have been reviewing it, and I'm really excited about what's coming up. So, but let's get back to the point. Let's talk about SchoolMark, the benefits to schools and trusts, and why did the ISBL support the development and award this as a kind of initiative, as a project?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is that just by way of background, so the architects of SchoolMark are an organisation called Keystone, headed up by Stephen Mitchell, who's the founder of Keystone. He is a very experienced chief operating officer. He's operated as an interim chief executive himself. Lots of experience in change, and between us, we felt there was something missing in terms of reflecting a trust's ability to reflect on its approach to resource management and financial governance. And this SchoolMark brings together the key actors, so business, governance, and pedagogy, to reflect on the approach and make an assessment of exactly where they are on the journey to excellence, and if excellence is being achieved across a range of criteria, then to be able to celebrate an award that recognises the great place that they're in. We spoke with sector bodies about this. Lots of positive feedback from sector bodies, feeling like us that this was an important area where schools and trusts needed to pay attention. And as you've said, Ryan, we've been very supported by the department with the implementation of this accreditation scheme. So it is a real opportunity to say to broader stakeholders, to parents, to the DFE, to others that are interested in education, we've got this, guys. We've got this because we've paid attention and we've looked forensically at every aspect of our approach to financial planning and resource management.
Brilliant. So, I think this is the kind of thing, and I know I've had I've been exposed to some of the content around there and had discussions with yourself, but I think anyone contemplating this, I think they'll want to know what the practical applications of it, because workload pressures and everything are just insane at the moment, and I was at both regional conferences and I was chatting to some of the school business professionals who were there, and I think a lot of people were kind of saying, the prioritization was a big thing. It was interesting, the regional differences. So when we were at the ABLE conference, that was very much about finance, policies, procurement. And actually, there was a big thing in the London conference, I think, if you remember, that people were talking about recruitment, retention, and that was really surprising. Not really, because I think the sector is struggling, but how much the volume of that kind of subject matter differed between the two regional variations.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you're quite right. Region to region, you're going to have different sets of priorities that come through. But I think there's a couple of consistent themes that we're seeing whenever we talk to school business leaders. One of them is recruitment is a huge challenge. Well-being continues to be a real issue. And then the other thing that consistently comes up is the extent to which school business leaders feel misunderstood. And what I mean by that is head teachers, governors, trustees, CEOs not understanding the depth of the role and the depth and the breadth of the role, if you like. So not feeling fully appreciated for the complexity which they manage, appreciated for the hard work they do, but not a deep understanding of the complexity of the elements of their role. And I think all of these things are things that we need to address. In fact, I was with a very interesting trust just last week, Children Learning Trust, with a gentleman called Sufyan Sadiq, who's got a really, really interesting people strategy, and they're bucking the trend in terms of both recruiting people into the trust, both pedagogy and support staff, and so recruiting them and retaining them. And I think there's lots to learn. And the way they do it essentially is they have become an employer of choice. So they make it really attractive to work for their organisation, and they follow through.
Brilliant. Stephen, I'm going to park it there and I'm going to move you to one side of the stage, but thanks a lot for joining us and coming on. So stick on, because we might have some questions later on. And I'm going to bring on the main event, Paul and Josh from EMAT. So thank you very much, gents, for giving up some time this morning. Josh, I know you drove quite a way to make sure that you could be beside Paul to talk about this, because it very much was something that you were part of. And Stephen, am I right in saying that Josh and Paul were part of the, how did they start with SchoolMark?
So just very quickly, we invited a number of trusts across the country to participate in a pilot, and thankfully East Midlands Academy Trust were quick out the block saying, yes, we'd like to be part of this. We're happy to expose all of the things that we do and see where we are in terms of this important area of leadership, and I hope they've had a positive experience. I'll let them speak for themselves. Brilliant.
So Josh, if I can come to you first of all, can you tell me, why did you put EMAT through the SchoolMark program, and also, how have you used the findings, the report, to support and drive your leadership discussions?
Well, answers to Stephen's question. Yeah, we enjoyed the process. We were one of the first and helped try to shape, from the Matt's side, what it felt like to be part of the process, and the feedback from Stephen and others was that it was positive. And I can't claim to have been involved deeply in the process. Paul will talk about that later. But the reason, I suppose, underpinning the reasons, there's maybe, I suppose, 4 key areas in the introduction that you kindly did for myself. I didn't realise you were going to read that out, otherwise I might have crafted a slightly better one for you. the bit around the discussions around putting children first, and that being sort of not necessarily at the forefront of the MAT world in every decision, was one of the main reasons, really. In that, if you aren't financially prudent and commercially astute, two words that aren't necessarily abundant in the MAT world or used in the MAT world, you cannot therefore invest in what we purport to be doing, which is the children. We at the time had moved over to gag pooling, which is another thing that lots of trusts still have yet to do, and I would encourage them to do that. If they're on the edge, I would say go for it. We've been able to navigate through the pandemic and more recently the significant issues around the financial crash, I suppose we'd call it, and around us, because we had gag pooled and we could redistribute our finances. But obviously, having done the gag pooling and having Ofsted to validate or not validate, your processes in terms of your pedagogy, and we have the regional schools and DFE regulatory processes. There isn't anything out there that either parents or anybody really can look at and say, similar to what you would in a trust pilot, 4 stars trust pilot. And what I wanted was to be able to get some triangulation and assurance for us as a trust that what we were doing financially was effective, was based on the right ethics, and was being effective. And if there were areas that we needed to improve, that we would do that. It links into, we've done an external review of governance. We've had a forensic accountant. We've had different areas review our provision. So we are a very open, transparent trust. I'm very lucky. Paul is exceptionally talented. Not many people in the MAT world as well, as a chief operating officer, comes from a commercial setting and had the exposure that Paul has had, which I'm sure he can talk about later. But having that expertise within the trust in the change management to enable us to be on the front foot, and then to assess how well or not we're doing that through the SchoolMark process was very, very positive for us. So there's many reasons, operational and strategic.
And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because you as a chief exec, I think, you're very much taking responsibility and ownership over the finances, and that's what I'm hearing is coming across, and understanding that the pedagogical and pastoral impact that will have by potentially exposing weak points or areas for improvement that can be developed on and worked on as the trust, so that there's the collective benefit and the output for your schools, for your educational delivery for the children. And that's, I think that's really interesting, just to hear you framing it in that sense, and also the reference to the kite mark. I know, but I think it is. It would be crazy, wouldn't it, if it got to the stage, and we're hearing a lot of stuff on the news. And interesting, that was one of the things that came up in the regional conference in London, was people were saying, we're struggling with recruitment, but all we're hearing is really negative pieces about the state of education delivery. And I'm not saying it's not there, but how is that going to motivate people to come into the sector? And if schools are depleting and having deficit budgets, giving that credibility and that assurance to your parents, to your staff, to that we are diligent, we are doing our best. I'm not saying there's not any troubles, but there, we are being diligent and doing that 360-degree assessment. Paul is very experienced and skilled, and as I kind of mentioned in his little introduction there, and Paul, we're going to come on to you in a moment, but what additional value do you think this added to Paul? How do you think this supported him and helped him?
Well, I think part of the process was around, as you said, self-reflection and putting it in the wider context. So a lot of decisions are made around finances in some organisations are based in isolation. So again, we use integrated curriculum financial planning alongside our GAG. So our budget setting is done at the grassroots level with the head teachers upwards. So they set a zero budget, basically, a resource budget, and then we can see what the affordability is of that. And I think having those mitigations around the stresses of, yes, we can have 4 TAs, no, we can't, based on an assessment tool saying, well, the impact of that will be this, is positive. And I don't think necessarily from Paul's experience it added value to Paul, but what it did do for me and for the trustees was that as the accounting officer, unusually for most roles as CEO, I'm personally liable, and to a certain extent so is Paul, I'm liable to the Secretary of State and therefore to the government for every penny that's spent. So I can be hauled up into, to them in Portcullis House to explain every penny we spend. You only have to look in the newspapers, this week, again, Violet Skies, not to, denigrate another person, but there obviously were issues around that organisation that had they maybe undertaken something like the SchoolMark, it might have flagged it earlier in their journey to enable them to have made different judgments. So it gives me a level of assurance and reassurance that alongside our internal and external auditors, Paul's word and our bank balance and our ledgers, that what we say we're doing is actually happening. And if we then, in all conscience, have to make a decision, like recently, that people have different viewpoints on the current funding for schools. I'm not going to make any political statements around that, but we were able to fully fund the pay settlements for our support staff and our teaching staff, and that was within our contingency funding. So, and that has not had a detrimental impact on our end of year result as of yet. But those things are done through forward planning, foresight, openness, transparency, and a willingness to be sort of. One of my favourite books is Black Box Thinking, and it's about saying we got it wrong. Don't blame somebody. Just try and fix it for the future. And I say it, and I get rather bored of it. And that's what we try to do in the organisation, is that if there is something wrong, we accept it, we acknowledge it, and we fix it. If there's other issues in terms of management after that, then they are dealt with separately. But so I think in many ways it didn't add value to Paul's expertise, because obviously, as I said before, he's had a breadth of experience. But for me and the trustees, for me putting my signature at the end of the year in the statutory accounts and being able to sort of feel I can sleep at night, that's a true reflection. It added a great deal of comfort to me, and Paul recognised that at the time, and actually he was quite up. He was pushing it for me in a way to say, Josh, you need this validation that what we're doing is right for your own peace of mind and your own professional sort of capacity.
New tagline for SchoolMark: better than night nurse, like helping CEOs sleep at night. Just finally, just to quickly, Josh, before we come on to Paul, so you're chief executive of Multi Academy Trust, or are there anyone in the senior leadership within the Multi Academy Trust thinking about SchoolMark? What would you say to them?
I think I just go back to what I've just said, Ryan. I think if there are multiple issues, there's lots of cliches about, sleepless nights, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, all of those things. If you're a LinkedIn buff, I get up at 5 o'clock and go running. I don't do any of that, by the way. But CEOs in different organisations have multiple stresses. In the Multi-Academy Trust world, they are amplified and magnified through a relatively hostile media segment, as well as parental apathy. So I think as a CEO, if you want to be sure that you are on the right path, and you want external validation of that, this is one of those things that you can get alongside disability badges, other ones that I won't mention because Stephen will say he's paying for this call. They are there to say you're doing the right thing. So I would encourage anybody, any CEO of any size, whether you're standalone or whether you're Oasis, I think you can gain value from going through an external validation process that shows you or shines a light on some of the areas that you may not have considered.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Paul, thank you for joining us this morning. And you've had quite an introduction and a lot of praise, I know, from Josh there. But you were kind of hands-on. You were at the tip of the spear for this. So did you find the SchoolMark kind of project onerous? Or was it natural? Was it easy? How did it work?
No, I wouldn't say it was onerous at all, to be honest. And also just covering off a couple of things that we talked about in earlier with Josh about why to do this. Even when you have experienced staff, that external validation, but also you you always need to learn. You can't ever stop learning. You never know everything. So you can only see what your experience ever tells you. And one of the interesting and useful things really in going into SchoolMark was looking at how we developed our practice and what processes and governance arrangements and financial governance we had in place. So the SchoolMark process is really looking at what you've got in place and then either saying, actually, that is good practice, that's excellent practice, or there are things that you can do to improve, or have you thought about this? So from the term of view of whether it's onerous, you're really, the bit that took a little bit of time was just collating the information that we already had into one place so that it could be looked at, could be reviewed. And that it didn't take a lot of time, but we just put that in one place and then uploaded it onto the systems the Keystone operated. But essentially, it is looking at all the things that you have in place. So it's not saying, well, do you do this? And if you don't quickly do it and show what the answer is, it's about how do you manage? And that's, so from that point of view, it's not onerous at all. And then that also gives you a view of perhaps where gaps are, if there are any gaps there. We felt rigorous processes for setting our budgets, but as I said, you can always learn. There's always a nugget of information out there. Perhaps someone else is doing a little thing that will help improve your processes, your financial governance, and provide that extra impact into the children that you're supporting.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Like you said, like it's asking you how you're doing thing rather than can you show me this thing? Because I know, like not that I've ever been through SchoolMark, but let's say tender documents, like fill in this box, and a lot of time you're just like typing something in, like and it's not that the fact that you're trying to formulate your kind of workings into the box for the question, if that makes sense, rather than saying like, can you evidence this? Can you evidence this? Which would get you a very different result, I think. And that's really intriguing. Can you tell me, appreciate you might not want to say everything on live stream, but was there any interesting insights that you found out as part of the discovery process?
Yeah, I think there were. I think that mostly what was really good is that we were able to, with the feedback that we had, basically evaluated that what we were doing is best practice, is outstanding practice in many areas, from how we link our finance strategy at that strategic level to operational plans, how we set out what our objectives are for the next 3 years from our financial plans, this is on financial governance, and have trustees approve that, to then working into our operational plans using integrated curriculum financial planning, using key benchmarks for things like non-pay, and also using the local context in schools, and then going back with a budget towards the end of the summer to present to trustees, and the trustees' journey on that and how we keep them informed during that period. And one of the things that we also did a lot of, which was validated, is where we weren't in line with any key performance indicators, we don't follow them slavishly, but what we do is say to trustees within our budget papers, for example, we are going to be away from this because this school needs a different journey. It needs a little bit more involvement. It's a developing school or a new school. And so that's why, and we quantify that in cash terms. And that's so important because then that gives the trustees the empowerment to say, yes, I'm happy to spend 200,000-300,000 on this because that school needs it. And I don't need to spend it on a school that's in a much, much better place. And that's also how gag pooling helps us target our resources to the greatest need. One of the interesting insights which came out of it, which we were doing but have strengthened, was also getting clearer the priorities across all the schools and having that impact assessment, so that when we were putting investment in two areas, we're now looking at that alongside of the educational improvement and saying, okay, we've split that group down, or we've put some nurture groups here, or we've got additional support staff into one area. Is that having the desired impact over a 12-month period? Or next year, do we need to consider doing something different? Or do we need to leave that support in place? So tying up investment in schools with the impact that has in the development of the children, that's something that we strengthened as a result of the SchoolMark review. It made us think more about how those things tied together.
That's really interesting, and I think it being a catalyst for commentary. So, I mean, it's all chief execs or trustees or governors, or, whether you're looking at helping your local charity or your school. I'm a parent governor, so I see the count of the school. It's the commentary that really explains actually what's going on. And I think that it being a catalyst for that commentary, I think it's great. And the impact assessment, as a tool that can be used to support impact assessment is it's something I'd never really considered as part of these discussions. So that's really insightful.
Right.
Go on.
So just on that, I think it's really important that SchoolMark is sufficiently agile that it allows context to be a really driving force in terms of where you place the emphasis. And I think, as Paul's just alluded to, there are important metrics. There are national recommended levels, both in ICFP and other benchmarking tools. I think it's important to know your numbers, but to be comfortable and confident to step outside of those best fit lines and say, we're over here because this is what we need to do for that group of individuals. And I think what SchoolMark isn't is this kind of binary yes or no. And if you answer yes to certain questions, then you'll get the accreditation. What we're looking for in SchoolMark is, do you understand the resources that are available to you, and do you target them where they need to be deployed, notwithstanding that there are limits to the resources that are available to you. And that's the very kind of nuanced but important part of this process.
Yeah, no, very good. Paul, final question for you. Again, from, kind of implementation piece, anyone thinking about doing this, top tips, what are your top tips?
Well, I would certainly say do go for the review and accreditation. It will help you evaluate where you are on your journey to any trust, big or small. It will also give you food for thought on perhaps areas that you need to look at. But wherever you come from and whatever background you've got, I've got 40 years as a qualified accountant and working across a lot of sectors and brought that in. But you never, ever know everything. You can never stop learning. And best practice develops. This is a relatively young sector. It's predominantly been around for the last 10 years, and that's all. So best practice that you thought was best practice 5 years ago isn't now and won't be in 5 years' time. So go and consider using SchoolMark. I would encourage everyone, use it to evaluate where you are against the practice that the evaluation teams can see out there, and use it to develop the best practice. We're in a point now, and have been and will continue to be, where every penny really counts. And so being able to use that money that gives the greatest impact, not just saying, okay, well, we've done this for the last year, so we'll do this and a little bit more of that, but actually using the information that you got and using the money you've got as wisely as you can, and get all the pennies to count to give an impact to the children that are being educated within your trust. And that and always keeping an open mind on what else you can do and how you can improve. And that's why I would consider advising colleagues in trust to go for the SchoolMark accreditation, because it will give you either validation on that route, or it will help stimulate debate within your trust.
Brilliant. Josh, Paul, thank you so much. It's been really a delight to talk to both of you and to see the kind of the dynamic kind of and cooperation and collective kind of vision on improving finances within the trust. Thank you for being so open and candid. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to listen to this today and just be like, wow, like this is something for potentially us to aspire to, for me to aspire to, in the way that we're, really putting finances at the forefront and recognizing getting that right will have a massive impact on the children. And I think that's just admirable. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Stephen, final words from you from the second of ISBL Talking Heads. Any final words?
Yeah, again, just like to extend a thanks to Josh and Paul for sparing the time to talk through the process, and I echo all of their comments. This is in no way a scheme that's designed as a stick to beat the sector with. It's an opportunity to demonstrate practice excellence where you believe you're at that point. And if you're not, it's a diagnostic tool to help you on your improvement journey. So it serves both purposes. So of course, I would highly recommend you all take a look.
Brilliant. Okay, and we're going to pause it for there today. So thank you to all the audience that have joined us live. Really appreciate it. For those of you watching us on live on Twitter and LinkedIn, if you thought today's session was really useful, please reshare it with your networks. Make sure that this gets as wide a reach as possible. If you're looking for more information, you can check out www.schoolmark.org for more information about SchoolMark. Don't forget to subscribe to this Crowdcast channel so you get updated on every new Talking Heads conversation that we've got coming up in the upcoming months. As Stephen mentioned before, we've got this huge kind of calendar of content that's coming out from the Institute, really talking from all aspects of, kind of small to large, to east to west, and north to south, to old to new, to like everything is going to be covered across the school business profession, highlighting all the individuals and their journeys through managing and supporting the education sector. So that leaves me just to say a final thank you to our guests. Really appreciate it. Josh and Paul, you're doing some wonderful work at East Midlands Multi-Academy Trust. Keep it up, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.